Hi, I'm your friend Claude, here, as always, with...
Just Jamie.
And this is another exciting episode of the N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast. How exciting is it? Well, I suppose that is entirely up to your interpretation. However, wait till I tell you what we have in store today. It is the official
Summer Kickoff Show.
And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, we're recording this on May 14th, 2018. And that is squarely into the first 2 weeks of the summer entertainment season, according to, I guess, mostly Hollywood and mainstream entertainment producers for, decades now. It's an established tradition. Look it up. Where have you been? How do we define summer entertainment? Well, it's funny you should ask. I just happen to have that written down for you. Summer entertainment, basically, it seems to boil down to populist escapism. And it's designed essentially to be as enjoyable as possible to as broad of an audience as possible. Because obviously not everybody gets to have a summer vacation or a break. I didn't for many, many years. It depends on obviously your job and your life situation. But a lot of people do. I don't know if you can even say the majority does anymore, but for the sake of our show, the majority gets to have about 3 months off every summer. And a lot of people get bored, so they kind of ratchet up the fun and excitement of entertainment offerings to get you spending your money in the lean months. So pretty much everything released between the first weekend in May and the end of the first weekend in September, capped off by Labor Day, is considered summer entertainment. What are you looking forward to, sir?
Well, there's a lot of stuff over the course of the summer that I am interested in seeing and experiencing. Some of it will be new, and some of it will be stuff that I've been intending on catching up on. I mean, I do not have 3 months off. I'll be working, but nevertheless, I try to enjoy it. My kids are off from school. I get a little bit more time off here and there.
Well, you can live through them.
Hey, I can always live through my kids. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking forward to. And like I said, some of it is just things I want to catch up on after the fact. So, shows like Luke Cage 2, Season 2, Jessica Jones Season 2, Punisher, Altered Carbon, Supergirl, Vikings, The Expanse. These are all things that I'm behind on in terms of TV watching, if we just stick with that for a minute, that I hope to be catching up on over the course of the summer.
Yeah, some of those I've seen and am caught up on, I guess, and some of those I have never even watched. It's quite a list.
Yeah, I do. There's one more on the list. It's a show called Castle Rock. It's going to be on Hulu. It's like sort of I don't know if it's official canon. It's sort of based on Stephen King's writings, and it's going to be a series. It takes place in this, of course, it's a New England town called Castle Rock.
Right.
And many various supernatural misadventures will ensue. And it just looks very interesting, sort of maybe a Stranger Things, but not so kid-centered.
Fair enough. Yeah, that sounds intriguing.
I think it's the entire series debuts July 25th.
Sweet. So besides that, of your list, what would you say you're most looking forward to, whether it's seeing it new or just catching up?
Oh, in terms of TV stuff, boy, that is tricky. Okay, so there's basically 3 off of this list. Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, respective season 2s. I think The Expanse is going to be finishing up its 3rd season on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I haven't watched any of it, so I've got a lot to get into. And so I'm just curious because I've heard really good things about it. I like sci-fi, of course, and again, I've kind of stayed away from too much digging to get all the information and know everything about it. I want to go into it fresh. But I'm just kind of that's one of the big ones I'm looking forward to, and there's a lot for me to get into because it's a high concept show, but I think they have pretty long seasons. They don't do these like limited run seasons, so there's a lot of material to sort of get into.
Isn't that the one I tried to tell you about when we were in the bookstore. I had just seen like a preview for it and thought it was new.
Yeah,
The
that
sci-fi
sounds
show.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had been aware of it, and of course, it's based on a series of novels that I really don't know much about.
Yeah, I was impressed by it.
I've been aware of it for a while, but and I've been DVRing it for like the last few seasons, and I haven't watched it because there's other things that I'm watching.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. It's an interesting time in television. It's certainly a golden age in terms of like variety and choice, and the different amount of television delivery systems, if you will. The options are pretty intimidating especially if you're just getting into it.
Absolutely. And once you start falling behind, sometimes it could be, it can be sort of overwhelming to think, oh, I got to catch up.
Right.
Because then, I mean, at least with these high concept shows, and I was wrong about The Expanse, actually. In 3 seasons, there's only 26 episodes.
Okay.
So it is kind of like these others. So that's the one good thing about a lot of these sort of high-end TV shows is that their runs are limited.
Right.
So you don't have to catch up on 20 or 30 episodes a season. It's 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13. The one exception to that on my list would be Supergirl, because it's a regular network show that runs a lot of episodes.
Well, you're in luck, actually, especially this season, because they took 3 friggin' months off.
Yeah, I was aware of that. I should have used it to catch up on the first half of the season.
Very
Oh, well.
frustrating. I hope that they don't repeat this strategy next season, because I was actually watching it week to week, and it was very annoying to take such long breaks, and you almost stop caring. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they lost a chunk of their audience.
I mean, even again, when you watch some of these high-end shows, watching a regular show over the course of so many episodes, you can feel sometimes the thinness of the narrative.
Right.
One show that's felt really thin this season that I've been watching is Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're stretching this mostly singular storyline over the course of the whole season, and there's some times where it's like, oh, they're not going very far here, or they sort of hit the same emotional notes over and over and over again. And I thought the previous season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was really well handled, because they took a long network TV season and broke it up into three almost entirely different storylines / shows, and then just brought them all together in like the last 2 or 3 episodes at the end of the last one.
Cool. I for my upcoming summer TV picks, I only have 2. One of them you mentioned, Luke Cage season 2. So it's weird because I've stated previously on this show that I didn't watch any of Luke Cage, the original season.
Right.
But I saw the trailer for season 2, and it seems more interesting to me, I guess based solely on the fact that in this season now he finds out that he is not the only one with his level of powers or invulnerabilities.
Right.
And also he discovers that he can in fact get hurt. So those 2 reasons right there, I mean, I guess that just makes it that much more compelling.
Right. As long as they're consistent, because I talked about my pet peeve with the Avengers, but it's not just the Avengers; it's all superheroes. Their power levels changing based on what the story needs.
Right.
So as long as it's explained and consistent, I'm good with it.
The other of my summer TV picks actually came out earlier this month, May 2nd. All 10 episodes were released on that date, and it is the YouTube Red exclusive series Cobra Kai.
Oh, all right.
I'm gonna teach you the style of karate that was taught to me. Fear does not exist in this dojo, does it?
No, sensei.
Pain does not exist in this dojo, does it?
And yes, I've already binge watched every episode. Signed up for the free 1-week trial of YouTube TV, which includes YouTube Red, and I canceled it on day 3 because I'd already watched them by then.
Well done.
So, have you seen even the trailers or anything?
I have seen the trailers, yes. Yeah. I have to say, it looked extraordinarily hokey.
Yeah, it's weird because, the trailers, I guess, give you everything you need to know, especially if you're a pre-existing Karate Kid fan. It kind of seems like it's designed mostly to hook the existing fans.
Right.
The show itself, though, is surprisingly well done, and done in a way so as to be as kind of universally appealing. There's plenty of stuff in there for existing fans, for sure. But it actually comes across more similar to like a premium network drama than like a kids property rehash. And it doesn't shy away from language or adult scenarios either.
I don't want to say I'm surprised, because I guess I would be surprised if it was as hokey as some of those early trailers made it look.
Right.
Do you agree with me that those, like the first trailers, really made it look like
Yeah.
it looks extraordinarily cheesy?
I think it's because there's been the recent, I guess, the last 5 to 10 years of pop culture presence having to do with Karate Kid has been in that style.
Right.
It seemed consistent with that. Like the last time you saw Ralph Macchio and William Zabka, who played Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence respectively, together on anything was on the sitcom How I Met Your Mother.
Right.
Where they basically playing parody versions of themselves. And Ralph Macchio also kind of pseudo-famously did a Funny or Die video called Wax On, Fuck Off, where he makes total fun of the character and everything.
Right.
And this was, I think, 2011 or so.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been some kind of more cheesy, humorous angles taken. And I think they use that to their advantage. They kind of acknowledge it, but then they move on from it.
Right.
And they really kind of hook you in pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I saw at least 2 trailers. There was a super early trailer where it just shows you the cheesy stuff and sort of the nostalgic throwback stuff.
Right.
There was a second trailer I saw actually in a movie theater, because they didn't release the whole series. They released like the beginning of it in a theatrical release.
The first 2 episodes, yeah.
Yeah. So I think they did a trailer for that, and you could see that, the set pieces and the way the scenes were shot were done in a serious way. It didn't look like a Nickelodeon sitcom or something. This is not a Girl Meets World situation.
No.
So I guess I'm not super surprised to hear that they did it in sort of a thought out, well-made way.
Right. I mean, it's definitely got a pretty, I don't want to say obvious, but, it doesn't have a Game of Thrones budget is what I'm trying to say.
Well, sure. Very few things do.
It's a limited budget, but they really make good use of it. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Karate Kid going back to the 80s, and, I think it's awesome that it exists. I think it's probably, I guess, a little later than ideal overall, but better late than never, of course.
Right. And now they have these different outlets for something like this too, so
right.
that also helps make it feasible.
For sure. Yeah, then that's probably the main reason that it got it made. I will say that as much as I love nostalgia, and as much as I love properties that kind of highlight nostalgia, some of the nostalgic elements in this do feel slightly forced, but I think the general audience probably will just see it and go, oh, I remember that, and be fine with it.
Yep. Yeah.
I also think that throughout the season, the character development for a few of the key characters seems a little bit rushed. I mean, it is only 10 episodes, and they are only half-hour episodes.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a limitation. But, without spoiling anything, that was just kind of my initial response. And that's really kind of small nitpicks. Overall, it's a very satisfying and well-made product that I think adds to and respects the established Karate Kid mythos, which is a big sticking point for me and for nostalgic properties in general that are made in the modern day, where they don't necessarily seem to care enough about the established stories and characters. This one definitely does.
Right. I don't have any special nostalgic connection to the Karate Kid. I've never been super into it, so I don't know that will have any effect on me watching it and enjoying it or whatever. Maybe that'll make it easier for me to enjoy it just based on its base elements and not sort of the nostalgic throwback things that it's doing.
I think so. So that's the TV portion of what we have to look forward to this summer. Let's move on to the big screen. Do you have any particular movies that you're excited about? I
mean, there's a lot of them, and we can go into more detail on just a few in a minute, but I'll just kind of go through sort of a reference to what the release schedule is. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Deadpool 2, Solo, A Star Wars Story, whatever it is. Hotel Artemis, Jurassic World, The Predator, and then 2 that are kind of new to me but look intriguing again, Replicas and a movie called Kin. Kin. So maybe we can talk about the more obscure ones if you want.
Yeah, I have, of course, Deadpool and Ant-Man on my list, as well as The Incredibles 2. But I also have interesting-looking movies I hadn't heard of previously, or had heard very little of. One being Action Point, another one called The Happy Time Murders, and one that I'm surprised you didn't mention called Teen Titans Go.
Oh, that's
to the
right.
movies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, yeah, feel free to dive in.
So there's a couple I want to talk more about. I'll just say that just to sort of maybe be a little bit contrarian to some of sort of the internet reaction after Avengers came out, was that it was such a emotional and it was this big sort of moment in the buildup of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that people were like, after all that, how could I possibly get excited for an Ant-Man movie? You know,
Right.
he wasn't even in the Avengers. But the way I think things are going to go in the MCU, I think that the Ant-Man characters, with their ability to shrink into the quantum realm, and that brings you to quantum time, possibilities for time travel, I think that that's going to be the whole key to what happens in the Marvel movies. I've already said this in this podcast, so I don't have to carry on about it. But that actually has like piqued my interest for this movie to see how they start hinting at that.
Yeah, even if it's not done in that specific method,
Right.
they're not just making an Ant-Man movie and throwing it away. It's obviously going to be essential and relevant, even if not in a major way. There's going to be pieces of it that absolutely matter to Avengers 4.
Right. So I'm excited to see how they handle that.
Yeah, I think that's the real draw.
Deadpool 2, I think that we don't have to get into that one too much. There's obvious reasons. The first one was
Right.
great.
Yep.
I expect this one to be really good. So I'm excited for that for obvious reasons. Solo, I know you're probably going to skip.
Yeah, I'm definitely skipping.
I think you're getting over the Star Wars thing because, you know, they've made some subpar material lately. It is getting some good reviews, and I think I'm going to go and see it and try to appreciate the new while trying to overlook a new actor in the part of Han Solo.
Fair enough. We will look forward to your thoughts when you do see it.
All right. And I think anybody our age, or, well, it doesn't have to be our age. So many people have been waiting so long for Incredibles 2.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's so overdue.
14 years in the making.
Yeah.
Absurd.
So I'm looking forward to that. I hope it hasn't been too long. I expect that to be good, too.
Yeah.
In Jurassic World, I'm just a sucker for giant CGI dinosaurs. Even if the movie's not great, I'll go see it.
Well,
the first
I mean-
one, the last Jurassic World, I liked. They're never going to recreate Jurassic Park, the original.
Right.
But for what it was, I liked Jurassic World. It was fun. It was nonsense. And I'm okay with that once in a while.
Yeah, I almost feel like, I mean, it's kind of similar to the Star Wars property, where it's getting to the point now where you can't have a summer movie season without a Jurassic Park movie.
Right.
As much as I'm not really into Jurassic Park, I do think that they are probably handling the property better than they're handling Star Wars in terms of keeping consistent content coming.
Yeah, and if they're just going to keep it light, just keep it light. Just let
Yeah.
it be what it is, you know?
Right.
I have to say, I like Jurassic Park a lot. Jurassic Park, the original, was probably one of my top 5 movies of all time. I really, really like it. So that brings me to the first of the more obscure... Well, first of all, is there anything you want to focus on before I go down the rabbit hole of these more obscure things?
Not yet. I'll just throw it in, I guess,
All
as
right.
you go.
The other not obscure one is the new Predator movie.
Oh, yeah, it's like a reboot, technically, or retelling?
A side quill. Like, I don't think you have to retell or reboot it. You just tell a different story with the Predator. It looks kind of like a basic one. Predator shows up in a town or whatever. It looks like
Right.
there's other sci-fi elements, but it looks good. But nothing I'm super excited for, but I'd like the Predator, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to the more obscure stuff. Have you seen the trailers or any of the information for this movie, Hotel Artemis?
No, I haven't heard of it until you just mentioned it.
The Artemis is a secret hospital for criminals.
This place was built on trust and rules.
If you knew what she could do to you with just that cup of coffee.
You're lucky this place has rules.
Visiting hours are never.
Hotel Artemis.
You might want to buy some scented candles. It smells like somebody died in here.
They did.
In theaters June 8th.
All right, so it looks like it doesn't take place within the John Wick universe, but it looks similar to that. And it's a hospital for criminals.
Interesting.
And there are rules, like no weapons, no this, no that. It's got Jodie Foster who runs this hospital. And one of her the orderlies of the hospital is Dave Bautista. And it's got Jeff Goldblum in it as a bad guy. Charlie Day is in it. It just looks really, really unique.
Interesting.
And as soon as I saw the first trailer for it, I was very intrigued.
Yeah, I guess now that you mentioned that, I did see the trailer, but it didn't really stick with me, I guess. But your description does sound pretty interesting.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times, and it's drawn me in.
I'll jump in with one of my more obscure picks.
Fair enough.
I don't know anything really about it. I haven't seen a trailer. I just know it's a synopsis, and that is enough to get me very interested. A movie called The Happy Time Murders comes out August 17th, and this is all I know about it. Jim Henson's son Brian directs this adult Muppet caper starring Melissa McCarthy about a detective investigating the murders of the cast of an 80s children's TV show.
What?
Mind blown.
I am intrigued.
Yeah.
Are there trailers or anything out for this, or is it just?
I don't know that there's any trailer yet. I saw some concept art from like 2012. I guess they've been working on it for a long time.
Well, yeah, it takes about that long to make one of these movies.
Right. But that's all I know, and it's enough to definitely raise an eyebrow for
Yeah,
me.
I'm sucked right in immediately, I have to say. I've not heard one whisper of this movie that you're describing.
Yeah. It's got an interesting cast. Melissa McCarthy, of course, who doesn't really do much for me, but in the right project, I think she can be good. Elizabeth Banks, who I do like a lot. Joel McHale, who seems kind of made for this type of project.
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph, and others that I'm not familiar with. So,
Wow.
Cool.
Yeah, it does sound cool.
All right, well, I'm going to talk about a movie called Action Point that looks interesting this summer, coming out June 1st. It is the newest Johnny Knoxville vehicle. Its synopsis is simply, a daredevil designs and operates his own theme park. So, since I'm a sucker for just about anything Jackass related, and like the idea of Jackass people having their own theme park just seems like complete dumb fun.
I did see a trailer for this one,
did.
I have to say.
But yeah, so Action Point sounds very cool and very surface fun, and that's a lot of times when I go to a movie, I like that. That's why I love the Expendables movies. You know exactly what you're getting. You're gonna smile the whole time. And I anticipate this being similar.
I have to say, as lowbrow as it is, going to the theater for a Jackass movie was such an enjoyable experience. I mean,
absolutely.
Even like Roger Ebert had to like begrudgingly give it a thumbs up because you just can't help it. It's just hilarious. The whole crowd's laughing.
Right.
There's a community vibe to it.
It's true.
It was really enjoyable. So I would imagine that going to see a movie like this would be a similar experience, even though they're playing, characters instead of just being themselves, throwing themselves off of buildings or whatever.
Right.
So moving on to my next one.
Yeah.
So this one looked interesting to me. It is a movie called Replicas, starring Keanu Reeves. It's a sci-fi movie. I'll just read the synopsis. In a Christo-fascist collectivist future, a daring synthetic biologist, after a car accident kills his family, will stop at nothing to bring them back, even if it means pitting himself against a government-controlled laboratory, a police task force, and the physical laws of science. First of all, I like sci-fi, and secondly, I like Keanu Reeves. So that's pretty much all it would take to...
Win-win.
That's all it would take to make me think, look again.
Yeah, it sounds intriguing.
Yep. I don't know that much else about it. It's kind of a later summer release, so it's not in the prime time of the big money makers, so it's probably not going to be one of these huge $200 or $300 million movies. But I'm still interested.
Cool. I think the only one I have left is the Teen Titans one, which I am woefully underqualified to discuss. However, my one interesting and enticing point about this for me was that Nicolas Cage finally gets to play Superman.
Yes, it is amazing. I did see that. There's a trailer. It's good.
Nice. Yeah, I've only seen the clips that you have directly shown me about this show, and it's not really my style. I can appreciate the humor and the kind of intellectual position that the writing happens from. But I think I would give this a chance. Probably not in the theater, but I would watch it.
Yeah, as much as I like it, I don't know that I would go to the theater either, just because, I have to prioritize that kind of spending.
All right.
But I really like Teen Titans Go, and it's interesting because there are a group of people that hate Teen Titans Go because the original Teen Titans show was taken off the air and replaced with this one.
Right.
And it wasn't what that crowd of people wanted, but I was never into the Teen Titans show. So it's weird. We're sort of at an age range where I can watch Teen Titans Go and think it's hilarious because the comedy hits all the right notes for somebody that's my age.
Right.
But there's a slightly younger demographic that doesn't want to see that because they want the continuation of their own show. It might be similar to like if Batman the Animated Series were abruptly canceled.
Yeah.
And replaced by The Brave and the Bold or something right away instead of other things in between. There might have been a disappointment there, but
can't say I don't understand their position.
No, I do understand it, but I can appreciate Teen Titans Go on its own merits, and I think it's hilarious.
Right.
We do an entire episode on like the Oregon Trail, and in a multi-part, like a 4-part episode that hits notes of the heavy metal movie and 80s album cover art and 80s cartoons and mashes them all together into this amazing compilation, The Night Begins to Shine.
Yeah, honestly,
That show's amazing.
That probably should have been their first movie.
Really, I'd be so on board with that because I watch it whenever it's on. It's so good.
Nice. I think that brings our modern and upcoming summer entertainment section to a close. Let's go back in time, shall we? I have I've prepared a list of the top summer movies from the past, and what I feel are the most important heavy hitters and the most notable. And I don't know. Do you have your own list, or?
I don't have my own list, so I will experience yours and see if I want to make any suggestions.
Yeah, feel free to add your seasoning to my meat. What?
Moving on.
So, the list starts off for me with the granddaddy of all summer blockbusters. That would be none other than Jaws.
A fair choice.
Released on June 20th, 1975, and directed by Steven Spielberg, largely not the first Spielberg movie, but certainly the one that launched him into the Spielberg that we know and all love today, the stratospheric level of success that he enjoys currently. It came to a total final gross of $470,653,000, which by today's numbers sounds very small. Of course, adjusted for inflation, it's still a pretty high total.
I bet it is.
I don't have those figures. I'm only going straight grosses, straight worldwide grosses for all these. But you get the picture.
Absolutely.
It is the number one most successful movie of 1975 and 209th on the all-time list.
Now, was that an unadjusted list?
Yes, the list is unadjusted as well.
Right. So it's a lot higher than that, I would imagine.
Right. It created the foundation for the summer blockbuster by pretty much establishing the summer season as the best time for a movie of this type to have runaway success. It was originally scheduled to be made in 55 days.
Wow.
Yeah, on a budget of $3.5 million.
Whew.
Which is obviously by today's numbers, again, very scant.
Do you know a single episode of Game of Thrones budget is like $15 million?
Insanity. The difficulties of shooting in the ocean and the fact that Bruce, the mechanical shark, constantly broke down,
right,
took the schedule to 3 times the original amount and the budget twice as much. So it came in at a final budget of $7 million. However, Jaws was so popular that it made its money back in only 3 weeks and passed the $100 million mark on its 59th day of release.
Wow. And catapulted Steven Spielberg to a position where you could argue him for other spots on this very list that we're talking about many times over.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spoiler, Jaws will not be the last entry of Mr. Spielberg on just my list alone.
Yeah. Well, it's a totally fair release. I don't have any arguments for it, that's for sure.
Do you have any specific memories or experiences relating to Jaws?
Not really. I remember... No, the short answer is no. I don't remember the first time I watched it. I think it was old enough where it wasn't some sort of traumatic event.
Right.
Strangely enough, the only Jaws memory I have from being a really young kid is that my parents were watching the terrible Jaws 3, like after hours, like a late movie. I was a kid. I was supposed to be in bed.
Right.
But I snuck out of my bedroom, and I laid on the hallway floor, and I could see into the living room to the TV if I laid just right. And I watched Jaws 3 from that position. And it occurs to me now as a parent that there was no way in hell that they did not know I was there.
Right.
They knew I was doing that and let me get away with it. I'm sure of that at this point. But that's my biggest Jaws memory. I saw the original Jaws years later, so it wasn't traumatic or especially scary.
Yeah.
But still, obviously, it's Jaws, so I have nothing bad to say about it, that's for sure.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I have a weird relationship with it. I'm not like a Jaws super fan, but
Right.
I do have an odd love for it, and I guess just the way it combines different elements and different types of filmmaking. It does have blockbuster moments, but it's also a very kind of quiet, intimate movie, kind of almost more like suspenseful thriller.
Right.
Almost more drama at times. I think it combines all those really well, and the looming element of this shark kind of tying everything together throughout it, and it builds up to such a great finale.
Right, and it's one of those old school movies that just holds so much back from you.
Yeah.
And uses that to build the tension. So, and obviously that was both, I mean, it was as much or more a technical necessity as it was a creative choice.
Absolutely.
That's very similar to a movie that I feel like might not be on your list that I'm going to add later. Okay. But we'll get to that in due time.
Alrighty. Well, we're going to go chronologically here. The next movie on the list that kind of took the foundation that Jaws laid down for the summer blockbuster and built an empire on it. Pun intended. None other than Star Wars, released May 27th, 1977. Directed by George Lucas, of course, and enjoyed a worldwide gross of $775,398,007. The number one most successful movie of 1977, to nobody's surprise. I think for quite a while it was probably the leader of all time. Well, probably outdone by its own sequel, or I didn't really look into that, so these are all just speculations.
Well, Star Wars kept adding to its own gross and re-releases, and then there was like a 3D release. So, no, there never was the 3D release. They started with the prequels when they did that, didn't they?
That's right, they didn't get past episode 1.
And then they stopped doing it when they started making the new movies. But still, it saw several different runs in theaters over the years, so then it kept, of course, and that still counts towards its original box office run.
On the unadjusted list, it sits at 81 of all time now. It's almost like not only just a show, but a series of shows in itself to talk about all of the effects of Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie before they tacked on the subtitle A New Hope in 1981. Just all the ways, the impacts that this has had on pop culture and movie making, and you could go on and on about this. But a couple of points of interest for me are the fact that George Lucas himself agreed to a salary of only $150,000 in exchange for complete ownership of the merchandise rights, which was, at the time, seen as the most foolish move you could possibly make.
Not true.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he had a crystal ball or what, but he got the rights and then proceeded to completely change how the rights for merchandising were used. He made sure that the advertising for the movie was targeted mostly directly to teens and children, and had it released, just before they'd be bored and out of school for 3 months. So that entire summer, Star Wars was able to dominate. People obviously went to see this thing 2, 3, 4, and more times throughout the whole summer and the year, even the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what it did. I mean, it's so easy to just kind of forget what a chance they took with it.
Yeah.
And how out of nowhere it was.
Right.
So, it's kind of amazing.
Well, especially when Jaws did kind of establish the summer season as being the blockbuster time. But until Star Wars happened, Jaws still was mostly seen as kind of a fluke. Star Wars really cemented the summer, like, okay, we're going to do this now kind of approach.
Like big budget space fantasy just wasn't a thing.
Right.
And even if movies were well made, they weren't necessarily big financial successes. So it's just kind of unbelievable. And plus now we do have the ability to look back on it, and it might not be number one on the all-time list financially. It might not, wherever it sits, however way you want to break down any list you could look at. But I cannot think of a single thing that has had a bigger pop culture footprint than Star Wars. It just doesn't exist. I cannot imagine anything with a bigger one.
I think that's a very valid point. The success of Star Wars was so great, actually, that it immediately affected both the way Hollywood approached filmmaking and the relationship that pop culture has with movies in general. It changed also how science fiction movies were made and viewed.
Right.
It also changed special effects by creating a new standard of quality and a new position of importance for how they're used in films going forward.
Yeah, which kind of put a higher expectation on everybody.
Yeah.
If you're going to do this, it can't be a second thought.
Right.
It's really got to be as convincing as anything else you're going to put on screen.
Absolutely. So yeah, Star Wars is probably the all-time epitome of summer blockbuster movies.
I think you mean epitome.
Epitome. Moving on to the third in what I view as the holy trinity of summer blockbusters in terms of establishing their success and kind of cementing their position of importance. We have Batman, the Tim Burton Batman, of course, released June 23rd, 1989. It was also the number one most successful movie of 1989, with a worldwide gross of $411,348,924, and it now sits at number 255 of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it was something. Its presence was just, I mean, it was ubiquitous. It was everywhere you looked. There was mainstream newscasts not talking about the movie, but talking about the merchandise. I remember Batmania being a topic of a newscast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really did something. And again, it's had less of a pop culture footprint than Star Wars because Batman is already part of something that pre-existed before the movie came out and has continued to exist in various forms. So that one movie doesn't necessarily rise above the crop in terms of pop culture. But so it's easier to forget what a big deal it was when it happened.
Well, that's an important point because really the reason why this is like the third most important summer blockbuster and also like such an important movie in like the history of movie making is that it achieved levels of success and hype that previously were only seen by movies that were sequels to already established like hot properties.
Right.
This was, even though like Batman is an established character, this was the first kind of mainstream live action release since the 60s TV show. So people were not only not knowing what to expect, but the promotion wasn't as everywhere as like we get today in the internet age. One thing that you really saw with Batman that you didn't see kind of before this was the sheer number of people paying for a completely separate movie just to go in and see the trailer and then leaving.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It was, I saw a newscast where they reported on that too.
It was also new in terms of superhero comic books on screen. This could be an entirely other topic in terms of the evolution of how those things are presented.
Right.
But it did a couple of things. First of all, it presented superheroes. You know, the Superman movies had come out and they'd been successful. There's a little bit of sort of maybe it's just the Superman hopefulness that exists with that character, but there's a certain level of cheesiness with the Superman movies, as well loved as they are. This movie really went into the shadows, first of all. And secondly, a lot of the general public, you know, weren't reading comic books. They didn't really, maybe a lot of the general public didn't fully understand the character of Batman. So everybody knew Batman from the Adam West TV series from the 60s, which was a campy comedy. People think of it as cheesy and campy, but it was like that on purpose. They knew what they were doing when they made that show. The humor on that show is way ahead of its time, actually.
Definitely.
But even beyond that, you had like Super Friends and, you know, the Batman cartoons that were always very sort of lighthearted, cheaply made, and bright colored, etc.
Right.
So this was a really different version of Batman. So again, they were really taking a chance with it. Not only with the look of it, but also with the casting, because it was controversial to cast sort of a smallish guy in the role and have the actor playing Batman not even get top billing.
Yeah.
So they took a lot of chances with this movie. A guy who hadn't done action or big movies on a big budget before, and Tim Burton. So they really rolled the dice in a lot of different ways with this movie.
I guess the final point I have about the legacy of the Tim Burton 89 Batman film is that it actually also had kind of an unfortunate contribution to how movies are continued to be approached and produced to this day. You know, it's arguably responsible for the entire default Hollywood method of using established intellectual properties as reliable popular movie vehicles seemingly over original ideas. I mean, at the time, that was the exception by far. But this also proved that, you know, years and years of comic book and novel and, you know, you name it, existing characters could now be mined for movie success.
Right.
And this definitely broke the dam open for that. And, you know, I've done my fair share of complaining and nitpicking over the years about that. But when it works, it works.
Absolutely.
It's just like anything else, though. When, you know, you have one or two things that really work well and everybody tries to copy it, so you're stuck with years of things that are less successful or less well done.
That's true, too. And a lot of those popped up in our episode a few months back on obscure superhero movies. And a lot of those were maybe influenced by this and less competently pulled off.
Yeah, I would say it also, I think the art direction of this movie had a huge influence for a long time, especially in the immediate aftermath of it, where you had, you know, again, another established comic book character in Dick Tracy being made. Although it was very colorful, it was very dark at the same time. kind of a similar approach.
And it had sort of a period piece. I mean, Dick Tracy straight up took place in the 30s.
Right.
With some technology that maybe didn't exist then. And, of course, Batman was kind of timeless the way it was presented in the Burton movie and after that in Batman the Animated Series, where it was kind of indicated that this was some sort of a period piece, but the technology didn't really match up to that.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to really commit to it being a part of any one particular timeline.
Right. Yeah, I also remember the Flash TV show that was on around the same time. Again, basically taking place all at night, and
right,
looking to say. I think it even had Danny Elfman doing the theme music. So, and I don't hate that show, but not everything. It's a problem we're still dealing with today. Not everything is meant to be a dark and gritty approach.
Right.
So I started saying we're going chronologically. Batman kind of threw a monkey wrench in the works just because of its importance. So going back into the chronological order, I have the second appearance of a Steven Spielberg film on this list, and that is E.T.
Okay, all right.
Released on June 11th, 1982, when I was a mere 2 days old. Its worldwide gross totaled $792,910,554.
Yeah, it was kind of a big deal. It's funny, I don't have... E.T. is kind of an all-timer, too, and something that I don't have a super close connection to. Obviously, I didn't see it when it was new because we were little.
Right.
I want to say I did see it in theaters on some sort of a re-release years later, and I was afraid of the running through the grass scene.
Oh, yeah.
With the glowing heart. It was very creepy. And I didn't connect very well with it over the years. I actually watched it again, like maybe less than 2 years ago, and connected a lot more to it.
Nice.
Despite the fact that I did not have sort of a warm nostalgia for it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting. I just understood sort of the subtleties of the storytelling more.
Right.
The dad being gone and E.T. filling that role in an odd way, and the relationship kind of structured along those lines.
Right.
I understood it a lot better and a lot more subtly as an adult than I did as a kid. And I guess for whatever reason, the things that I didn't understand as a kid, the other parts of the movie that should have sucked me in didn't. I can't explain why.
Yeah.
But I've come to appreciate it more recently.
Well, it's like any truly well done kids entertainment. It exists on several layers at once. The kids are kind of more drawn to the surface, the actual character of E.T. and
right.
The misadventures that he kind of gets into, and the adults, like you said, are able to pick up on the big picture and the story subtleties a lot more. E.T. was also, of course, the number one most successful movie of 1982, and it sits now at 76 of all time. It's something that I personally have always had a love-hate relationship with my whole life. I also saw it on, I guess, a re-showing in theaters. It was actually the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater. I saw it in 1985 when I was 3, and I was scarred for life by the cornfield scene.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yep.
Elliot goes in with a flashlight, and E.T. freaks the fuck out. And it's actually interesting because I'm kind of grateful for that sheer moment of terror looking back, because if I hadn't been that frightened, I probably would not have any memory of seeing it in the theater at all. Because, okay. I mean, that's literally the only part that's burned into my memory.
Right.
And I actually remember not only what I saw on screen, but trying desperately to climb in the theater seat behind my mother to, literally have her shield me from E.T.
Wow.
And I remember her getting mad at me. But yeah, I mean, that was where it began. A couple years later, I think I was 5 or 6, I had a giant, I think it must have been a Drew Struzan painting of just E.T. on my wall. And I really liked it, but as soon as it was bedtime, I fucking hated it. So I eventually made my mom take it down. And then years later, during the 20th anniversary of E.T., when I was working at Toys R Us, they had a whole new wave of toys and action figures that, now had little chips in them so they could say lines from the movie and things. And being an action figure collector, actually was addressed, my hobby of collecting action figures was addressed in our new segment called Need It Got It. Look for that very soon. I bought several of the toys, and had them on my wall. And for whatever reason, they began to malfunction and speak on their own. And of course, when did E.T. want to talk and say phone home and whatever else? In the middle of the night when you're half asleep. So, I eventually took that off my wall and put that out in the living room. And yet I still love it, and I still think it's one of the best movies of all time.
Fair enough.
Moving on chronologically, of course.
Who else knows about this? SCTI in New Mexico identified a signal. Now, we estimate that it has a diameter of over 550 kilometers and a mass roughly 1/4 the size of our moon.
What the hell is it? A meteor?
No, sir.
No, definitely not.
How do you know?
Well, sir, it's slowing down.
It's what?
The next on my list is a little movie called Independence Day, or for marketing purposes, ID4.
So this movie I have a lot more connection to. I did see it in theaters when it was released. I very much enjoyed it. I still do. Its sequel was not that great. But yeah, it still has some charm to it. Because it really is light fare. There's not a lot of depth to this movie that I've been able to sort of extract, reading between the lines or anything like that. It's no E.T. in terms of that. But I think that it's a well done sort of popcorn disaster movie. And that is a genre that is rife with danger. Because there's been both literally and figuratively.
Right.
Because there's been a lot of attempts at that have been massive and unadulterated failures. And Independence Day is just good.
Would you say that Independence Day maybe not created, but sort of established what we think of the modern version of that popcorn disaster thing, like sent the template for it?
Well, I think it sort of reignited it.
Right.
Because there was a lot of that, like in the 70s with Airport 77, I think it was called.
Yeah.
There was an earthquake movie, The Towering Inferno, Poseidon Adventure.
That's right.
So there's a lot of sort of disaster-style movies. Maybe sometimes not natural disaster, set sort of in one place, but the same style of movie. But I think that you could say that this set off a chain reaction of other movies to come, because after this you would have Armageddon and Deep Impact and The Core. And so, yes, I think that's fair to say. And now, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is getting it all started again because he just did San Andreas a couple of years back. He's got Skyscraper coming up. So, I think that's fair to say.
So, of course...
Twister. Don't forget Twister.
Right. Well, that was actually the number 2 or 3 movie of 1996 behind Independence Day.
Ah, okay.
Of course, Independence Day being number 1. It was directed by Roland Emmerich, who became kind of known as the disaster movie king for a while.
Did he do the 90s Godzilla?
I believe he did the one with...
Matthew Broderick.
And the Puff Daddy song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's him. He also did The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Of course, starring Will Smith, who kind of became the de facto summer blockbuster king for a while there, starting with this. He had the Men in Black series. He had Wild Wild West. He had I, Robot, Hancock. Apparently, every one of those had a summer release.
Right.
Its worldwide gross was $817,400,891. And it is now sitting at the number 70 spot on the all-time list. So, yeah, I mean, I actually never saw it when it came out. I was obviously aware of it, the marketing being what it was and word of mouth. I saw it on video, I think maybe a year afterwards. And, I was never a super big fan of this style of movie, but it was definitely enjoyable. It had, I think maybe what it has that others either try to do and fail or just kind of neglect is like a nice balance of the spectacle with, some comedy, some action, some kind of a little bit of drama.
Right.
It just balanced everything more nicely than a lot of its predecessors.
Yep, and as hard as it is to maybe believe this, I don't think it went overboard too much.
Right.
Like, it was big, and it was, to some degree, a little bit of nonsense, but I think that there were times where they could have gone farther and they held back, and I think that is to its benefit.
Absolutely. So the final entry I have on my list of summer blockbuster movies is...
And there came a day
A day unlike any other. When Earth's mightiest heroes found themselves united against a common threat. To fight the foes no single superhero could withstand. On that day, the Avengers were born.
Avengers, the 2012 movie, the first time we get to see the big group of Marvel superheroes in a live-action film come together, directed by Joss Whedon.
Right.
Of course, the number one most successful movie of 2012, and it grossed $1,518,812,988.
Oh, man.
And still sits at number 6 on the all-time list.
Unbelievable.
And I still think it's the best Avengers film and actually the best superhero team film overall, even though I haven't seen most of the DC films that have come out since.
Well,
I'm confident.
They're not going to take the place of this one on the list. I do think that Infinity War is better. But it is, Infinity War has a lot more going on. So,
right.
I mean, Avengers is a very focused story. Not quite as much going on to its benefit. And well handled. Yeah, it was really good. I remember, man, the excitement for it.
Yeah.
When it finally happened. I mean, it was only 4 years of build-up, I guess, but you had seen a bunch of movies. They'd used a lot of movies to tell the story building up to it. And yeah, it was kind of a new thing because, well, the X-Men movies had been out for a while in terms of superhero team-ups, but this was something different. And, yeah, I'm not going to argue its position on the list. I think it deserves it.
Right.
If not financially anymore. I mean, it's still really high on the list, like you said. Other movies have passed it and are going to surpass it. But I think it deserves mention for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw it in theater. And it's one of the few movies I actually saw in 3D and really enjoyed in 3D.
Right.
I feel like a lot of times it's very easy to get let down with the 3D version of a movie, but this, for me, delivered overall the second best of any movie I saw in 3D. The winner, of course, having relevance to an earlier mention, being Jackass 3D.
Wow.
Yeah. Just pure enjoyable satisfaction.
In terms of 3D, yeah, I've been mostly disappointed. I feel like most of the time the 3D makes everything look muddy and dark. And I don't think there's very many movies that are really helped by 3D actually making it a better experience.
Yeah, do you have any final words or final choice?
The one movie that I really would like to add to the list, above all others, is, you're probably going to know what I'm talking about. It's another Steven Spielberg movie. It is Jurassic Park.
Of course.
Jurassic Park, in its time on the all-time list, sits currently at number 28, made $1.02 billion worldwide. So, pretty good number.
Yeah.
And I think it was successful in, it's really, Terminator 2 could maybe make a claim at this with the T-1000 special effects. Jurassic Park, it's easy to forget that before that, you didn't see a lot of CGI in the movies.
Right.
And even Jurassic Park, there's only something like 17 minutes of dinosaur time in the whole movie. And not all of that is CGI. There's a lot of puppetry, and there's even some costumes going on. But what they achieved in the special effects of that movie is kind of still mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's still, like, either not even, it's barely rivaled, let alone surpassed by almost any movie. I mean, plenty of movies that are more impressive and do different things, that have more going on, but in terms of, like, the way it was done and how tastefully, it's still the king.
Absolutely. And it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I know you don't necessarily have that much nostalgia for it. I went to see it in theaters when it was released. I remember calling a bunch of my different friends to see if they could go with me, and for some reason, nobody could. So the friend that finally did come with me was so scared of it, he just looked at the floor the whole time, and to this day we talk about that, because technically he's never really seen Jurassic Park, even though he was there in the theater to watch it.
Interesting.
So yeah, I just think that deserves mention, because not only because it's, really financially successful, but also because I think it did, do one of the first sort of really respectable, not hokey, well-made monster movies, sort of big budget special effects, but still a good story.
Right.
And also, I can appreciate it as a separate entity from the book.
Right.
Because, this is maybe a whole other topic. People are always, well, it's not as good as the book. Well, it can be just because it's different doesn't mean it's not as good.
Right.
You can't do everything in a book that you do. You know what I mean? That you can't do everything from a book in a movie. There's too much inner monologue, too much thought processes.
Yeah, it's a different art form.
Too many thought processes, I guess I should say. But I just think it's nearly a perfect movie, and it's probably, boy, I'd really have to sit down and think about this for an hour. It has a claim on being my favorite movie of all time, among a few others.
Nice, and it's still, I think, arguably. Well, I mean, to me, it's not very arguably, but I'm sure people would argue. But I would put it as still the best movie featuring dinosaurs ever made.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
Searching the databanks.
Yeah, I was. There's nothing that comes close. I mean, it's better than the other Jurassic World movies. What else? Jurassic Park movies. It's better than Jurassic World, even though I like those movies too.
Right.
I mean, what else are you going to compare to? The Land Before Time?
Yeah, stuff like that came before that, stuff that used stop motion, stuff.
Carnotaur.
Yeah. And probably, I'm sure there's a billion like B-level Jurassic Park knockoffs.
There surely are.
But yeah, I think this is the pinnacle by which all others are measured.
And again, it's just so, and it's Steven Spielberg, so that's why that's one reason it's so good. But
Right.
I don't know. Again, I hesitate to say it's my absolute favorite because I'd be overlooking something, forgetting something. But one of my favorite shots of all time is when that T-Rex comes out of its paddock.
Yeah.
Walks out between the cars. 1993 technology, so perfect looking.
Yep.
I'm a fan.
Can't argue with that. Well, I guess that brings our summer entertainment kickoff show to a close. I have been your friend Claude.
And I am just Jamie.
And we will see you next summer.
The N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast is a Ghost Factory internet production brought to you by the Wham Network.